Wow! Welcome to the third devlog of Project Insomnia, my first person dungeon crawler game. Last time, we were kind of racist towards the minimaps and gave the player the ability to kachapow and hiya, if you know what I mean. In this devlog, I'll go over the level design, in-game cutscenes, and how this game drifted into development hell. Oh, and one other thing. Yeah, I know it sounds bad, but don't worry about it. It's all good, man. Now, after where we left off, I slept for like 2 hours and I got started on level design. For level design, the levels in these types of games are basically hallways that at times get distorted due to the presence of a powerful demon, at least in Persona 1 and Devil Summoner, and in my nightmares, I guess. These levels are then broken up by a small isometric open world section where it's more like traversing a map of the area. Even in my restless dreams, I knew from the beginning that I wanted to maintain a first person perspective throughout the whole game, even through most of the cutscenes. Because of this, I decided not to do an isometric open world section and originally just planned for the player to go through these dungeons basically back to back. And I quickly realized this is actually a terrible idea. Just imagine doing the same thing for potentially hours, right? Well, things are gonna get boring real fast. And real quick, I gotta praise Devil Summoner for a dungeon crawler that came out in 1995. It actually has pretty good pacing, at least in my opinion. Honestly, just learn Japanese and play that beef kick of a game. Anyways, for the original opening area, I wanted it to be a small neighborhood, basically a level that doesn't really focus on combat, and it's meant to be a more relatable location to signify the start of a journey. And I know, that's basically the start of any JRPG game, right? Which I'm basically, you know what, because it's my first game, and I already said this multiple times, but you get the idea. Anyways, I guess I'll throw this out there now that this game is going to take place in a modern setting. And that's because I feel like the medieval fantasy setting has been done to death. Anyways, here's my first attempt, and it's not that very good. Since the levels can't be too crazy, I started off with a simple grid location, which quickly got yeeted. And I moved things around, and this is the second attempt, which, it still looks bad, but it's a little bit better. At least I think so. And as you can hopefully see, I experimented with giving this area street names so that the player can immersively guide themselves throughout the level, right? And it's also something that NPCs will mention when giving directions. For example, they could be like, hey man, just go to like Big Daddy Street. I don't know. Then they could be like, go north and take a left, take a right, go straight, keep going until you reach yeah, No, I'm kidding, but maybe not as crazy as that, but you get the point. Also, although walkable areas have to be a minimum size, at least be big enough so an encounter could potentially take place. Because again, the encounters are happening on the spot wherever you are. Here is when I noticed something that I was not really happy with. Even with these simple levels, I quickly realized that these levels are pretty flat. Now, I actually considered not talking about this next part because it can be pretty technical and even boring. Trust me, I'll give you the opposite of Insomnia. But this is where development slowed down for the first time and even straight up stopped for a good while. So I'm like obligated to talk about it, right? So you're gonna have to bear with me or, I don't know, skip to the next part. But this is also where I discovered a new way of traversing these levels, and it even affected the way I approached the level design for some of these dungeons. Okay, so the player couldn't move up and down because it was missing a collider and a rigid body. That meant that physics couldn't do its thing, right? So, well, I just slapped a collider and a rigid body, and this actually broke the movement, or at least it gave me some funky results. Then, after a lot of back and forth, and even considering starting from scratch, I gathered all my remaining mana and gave it one last try. Eventually, I just passed out and I woke up to this. No, not really. Now the player can detect walkable surfaces and move up and down without using physics. Yeah, so I actually recorded the whole process I had to go through to get these results. But it was like 5 minutes and I couldn't even bear myself, so I'll leave you with that. So after consuming a dangerous amount of coffee and not seeing the sun for like a week or two, I woke up from the coma that I put myself in, and I noticed something with my code. I don't know what it was, but I just heard something whispering in my ear that said, "Hey, you should add like 3 lines of code." And I did, and this happened. Yeah, so the player can now defy gravity. If gravity didn't want us, well, we don't want it. The player can now traverse more complicated surfaces that twist and turn. Since this was a late and kind of like unexpected discovery, it did make me rethink how to tackle level design, right? At least for some of the dungeons, since this means I have more freedom, right? It's something that I'll use in specific areas, right? I will have to do a lot of play testing to make sure I don't I don't give players motion sickness, right? Because I actually got dizzy while testing out this section, so and while right now it's not perfect, right? It does mean that now I could finally go back to level design. Because finding a solution so the player could do something as simple as going up and down different surfaces, right? That was necessary because obviously if the player can't go up a set of stairs, right, then that does affect the way I had to design these levels. And actually, I would love it if you, yes, you, if you would let me know if this makes you feel dizzy or if it's even a good idea, right? I don't know, just anything would help. But that's enough of that. It's time to go back to level design. I took that neighborhood concept and expanded it to be more of a hub world. This will replace that isometric open world section I mentioned before, and it will connect all the dungeons and other locations. But, Chotomate, first I need to create some doors to go in and out of these locations, right? So I created a couple of doors that I can use basically anywhere, right? And if it's not obvious already, I'm basically modernizing some of the level design of Persona 1 and Devil Summoner. For an example, in those games, using a door often triggered a loading screen. Well, not in this game. In Project Insomnia, the idea is to be as immersive as possible and seamlessly go from one area to the other. At least that's the idea, right? And for practice, I recreated the hallway from that one playable teaser. I did this to test out the doors and even try to understand the level design in that game, just to see if I can learn anything from recreating it. And also, PT is it's like a short game, so it's pretty easy to copy. On top of that, you could say the game is pretty good. But there is another reason why I recreated this level. Around this time, I began to have some serious doubts on the level design of Project Insomnia. I had doubts that they were any good. I would create areas and then throw them away, and if I didn't start from scratch, I would bring them back and adjust some things, and most of the time I would even throw them away again. So things got messy pretty fast. Whenever I would create a level, I was just not happy with it. Even now, I don't know if those doubts were insecurities or maybe I was too harsh on myself or maybe the levels I made were actually ass, right? After bashing my head against the wall for weeks trying to make interesting levels, I eventually decided to move on and come back to level design later. Now, in-game cutscenes. In-game cutscenes bring a lot of benefits like maintaining a consistent look throughout the whole game, the ability to make changes inside the game engine, and can seamlessly transition into gameplay. Here, I decided to create a cutscene that will mimic the opening to a game and seamlessly transition into gameplay. The opening sequence of this devlog was made just for practice, but spoiler alert, it ended up being the only complete in-game cutscene that I have as of making this video. Due to reasons that, trust me, we're gonna get into it. Other than the goal of seamlessly transitioning into gameplay, I honestly couldn't tell you what I was thinking when creating this cutscene. I simply wanted to create a specific mood, but looking at it now, I could see a lot of the frustration that I felt at the time. Also, I decided to do all the animations myself just to get an idea on how to animate for cutscenes, since I am going to be doing this myself when I start making the final cutscenes. I did the animations as fast as possible since it was just for practice, so that explains why they look like they belong in a PS1 game or something. Creating the opening cutscene took me about a day or so. One was to block out the scene, create animations, and simply play around with ideas. Here, I even removed some scenes that simply weren't working. The other day was mostly to give it a little bit of polish. And after this, I decided to go back to level design. When I came back to level design for the third time, I decided to work on smaller areas. One of the first things I worked on was blocking out an apartment for the MC, which I actually liked. I treated this area as if it was part of the opening of the game. Here, players can get used to the movement and learn how to interact with objects. Then, I decided to block out another small area, this time being a small building interior. I kind of experimented with this one and I ended up being happy with this area as well. Focusing on smaller areas seemed to be way better since creating the hub world has one big challenge. The biggest challenge of creating buildings where you can seamlessly go in and out is that the interior size also affects the exterior size. And now you may be saying, well, yeah, no shit, but that quickly creates situations where the interior may be fun to traverse, but the size needed to contain that interior creates a lot of empty space on the outside where it can be boring to move around in. I have to simultaneously design the interior and exterior of a building and also the surrounding areas of the hub world. Even buildings that don't have an interior have to be basically treated the same way. And this is to maintain consistency in the building sizes. When I think about the hub world, I think of a few landmarks. One of them being this soon-to-be ominous skyscraper you might have noticed already. I knew that the idea of having this building in the game was not going to be scrapped, so I decided to focus on it and maybe build around it. But before doing so, I decided to give the player the ability to freely look around. The player can simply use their mouse or controller to look around in any direction when they're not moving. While this feature is optional, it did bring a bit of relief when creating areas that go beyond the perspective of the player. And again, because originally the camera couldn't be moved, this addition made me finally change the compass. Now it's more of a compass bar, so it can be more accurate when using the free camera. And also, come on man, it looks cool. Then, one final thing I had to create was elevators. I did go back and forth on whether I should make them actually move in 3D space or have them be a sort of teleporter. I decided that the elevator will teleport the player to another identical looking elevator, and this is to hide the transition. I did this because it gives me freedom to create wacky scenarios where the elevator may take you somewhere physically impossible. Here's how it works. Once you enter an elevator, the main camera transitions to another camera so the player can choose the floor they want to go to. When a floor is selected, the elevator doors will close and after a moment, the player will be teleported to another elevator somewhere else. It's not perfect, but I think if I polish the camera shake and other details, I can hide the transition a little bit better. Here, you can see both the free look camera and the elevator being used with the second draft of the skyscraper I mentioned before. And this is actually all I have to share about the level design and in-game cutscenes as of right now. These past months have been a lot of experimenting and figuring out why things weren't working, but I am starting to narrow down a direction that I'll be taking for the rest of development. I do plan on talking about level design again later. Maybe by then I'll be also making actual models instead of using blocks, right? I don't really have much more to say about cutscenes, but if there is something you want me to talk about, let me know and maybe I'll talk about it in another video or at least try to give you a response. I actually was working on another cutscene when Unity announced their initial changes to their pricing plan. While it may be old news by now, I did want to quickly talk about it. When I heard the news, I stopped working on the cutscene since, just like everyone and their mother, I was considering changing game engines. And again, since so far we've been using Unity for Project Insomnia. While a lot of progress made on Project Insomnia can be ported to other game engines, something like cutscenes is more tricky since not all game engines may do their cutscenes the same way. Even after Unity made changes to their pricing plan again, it almost gave me less confidence since their decisions are all over the place and can't really stick to something. I'm sure that Unity going back and forth was just for the moment, but who knows, it could be possible that they won't make any more changes. But the idea of changing game engines, that seed has been planted in my head. While I still haven't fully decided, I'm going to be experimenting and researching to see what the best option is for me. It does suck that I'm here crawling my way out of development hell, and now I have to potentially throw away a lot of that work, but it is what it is. Now, even among the negatives, there has been a lot of positives. These past months, I've gotten the chance to discover other game developers. I have to mention Caius Nelson, who is working on a fantasy RPG called Circle of Orion, and also did this.
On this special occasion of a 1-year anniversary, I'm going to do a little bit of a pro gamer move and recommend 2 devlog series this time. First up, we have Project Insomnia by Ruben Ronquillo.
Very much a pro gamer move. My name might have been butchered, but it's all good, man. Circle of Orion has a Steam page, just in case you wanted to check it out. Also, I want to mention Studio Super Nebula, who, surprisingly, is also developing a first-person dungeon crawler game. Nani? Their game is called Rogue Proxy. They were also using the Unity game engine, and as of making this video, they decided to move to the Godot game engine. It'll be interesting to see how development continues for them. Lastly, I want to mention Amuro Tensei, who is working on a cyberpunk/fantasy turn-based RPG. The game is called Starless and straight up looks interesting, and there's even a demo for it, just in case you wanted to check it out too. The developer gave me some advice that I'll be putting into practice later in development. With that said, this is the part where I would show you a teaser for the next devlog, but I actually don't know what the next devlog will be about. Will it be on the next iteration of the turn-based combat system? Will I drop Unity like a hot potato and use something like the Unreal Game Engine? The noble and pedigree middleware from Epic Games? Will I ever fix my sleep schedule? Like and subscribe to support and follow the development of Project Insomnia. And as always, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think or leave any suggestions or don't, I don't know. It's getting rough, but we like it rough because one badass otaku once said,
I want to be number 1. How's that? Short and simple enough for you? It's gonna be a long, hard road. But who knows? Could kick ass. Could be dangerous. Could totally suck. What do you say, bro? Join me. Let's see how far we can take this. And for you there holding the controller right now, just press the A button. Let the bloodshed begin.